Hey you witches, welcome to the channel. Today we are going to talk a little bit about the Clovenstone Workings. I have a book review for you, and I also have a little experiment I'm going to propose. So stick with me through the end. For those of you who are new here, my name is Taya. Thank you so much for joining us. We talk about all things witchcraft, especially traditional witchcraft. And yeah, for those of you who are returning, maybe coming in from another video, thank you so much for coming back. And yeah, everybody, please consider subscribing. It's a great way to help us build the channel. And like I said, today we're going to talk about the Clovenstone Workings, a manual of early modern witchcraft by Robin Artisson, illustrated by Molly McHenry. Interesting book. Interesting book. I want to take you first through sort of the structure of the book, and then I'm going to talk about some my opinions, I guess I would say, some issues I might have with the book, and then we're going to talk a little bit about an experiment at the end, okay? So, the Clovenstone Workings. It starts off with an introduction. It's quite a lengthy introduction, and I just point that out because in, I think, most books, I don't know, I tend to skip over like introductory forewords, that kind of stuff, and just get right to the good stuff. You really do need to read the introduction in this book. It starts out with Dark Ecology of the Devil, and he talks about early Christianity, the environment and class levels, how they played into people's view of the devil in the early modern period, and he talks about sort of the devil himself, how he was viewed, how he was portrayed, how he is now. The next section is the Good Lady of Elfame, who is basically, in his practice, the counterpart to the devil is the Good Lady of Elfame. Then the next chapter is the Devil's Own, or the next section is the Devil's Own, where he talks about who were the witches in the early modern period and who are they now. He talks about sort of the people who were accused of witchcraft in our trial records versus those who practice witchcraft and other cunning arts. So I thought that was kind of an interesting distinction, right? An important one. And then his last section of the introduction is Sources Ordinary and Not So. This is a really important key piece to read, where he goes through the sources that he used, but he also talks about the fact that he used his own spirit guidance to develop these methods. And that's really important. It'll come up later, okay? But there's a mention of this in the introduction, is that he does use his own spirit guidance from the unseen world to build this, to build the details of this practice. We'll get to that. So then the next part, the first kind of, there's the introduction, and then the next part is called Soul Transformation, and it's really about becoming witched. So the first section is The Dark Glass, Seeing the Death. And it is really, this section is about becoming witched. It is about gaining the favor of the unseen, that he calls, that's what he calls the spirit world, the unseen world. So it's about gaining their favor. And then the next three sections of this part are the Lonely Soul, the Witch Dreams, and the Moon Sign, which then go on, now that you've gained the favor, is creating what he calls a breaching talisman, asking... using that talisman then to ask the favor from the unseen world of receiving witch dreams, then having these witch dreams, and then marking that achievement with jewelry or a tattoo. He just skips right into that, you know, or just go get a tattoo for yourself. I thought that was a little extreme. But yeah, so it's really about, it's the prequel, the work that you have to do before you can do his actual workings and contact with the spirit world. It's about becoming what he calls witched. So gaining your witching powers from the unseen world. So once you've gone and you've gained your powers from the unseen world, you've received these witch dreams, you then move on to the workings section. In the workings include a gateway ring, so like casting a circle or laying a compass, yielding green oil. Green oil is something that was mentioned in witchcraft trial records, and so he comes up with, he doesn't give you necessarily a specific recipe, he gives you some recommendations on creating this green oil. The Great and Terrible Name, which is like, this is advanced stuff, it's only for advanced practitioners, not to be tried right off the bat. Then there is transvection, which is basically soul flight, flying out, hedge crossing, whatever you want to call it. The Witch Feast, so the witch's Sabbath. And then the Dark Glass, a section on scrying. And then the Dark Glass, again, a section on using that scrying method to achieve a spirit audience. And each of those sections have their own words of power and associated sigils that he has developed. So the whole thing, if you ask me, is absolutely fascinating. I think it's an absolutely fascinating book. It's an interesting method. It's not like anything I've seen before, but there are, I don't even want to call it the tone of the book, but there's some, what I find to be very problematic things happening in this book. Not with the actual workings themselves. All right. So first of all, he calls this a manual of early modern witchcraft. This is not what people were doing exactly in the early modern period. Okay? From the trial records, he's pulled the framework, things like the green oil, transvection, the witch's Sabbath. Those are things that he has, these ideas that he has pulled. But the actual details, his workings in these sections, his words of power and his sigils, those come from his spirit work. But there is this insinuation throughout that this is authentic. And I find that a little bit problematic. Okay? So there was a brief mention on the source of those words of power and the, sort of these details in the introduction. It's like a paragraph. And there's like a little bit in the very last chapter where he again acknowledges that this word of power came to him from a spirit guide or a spirit contact. But it's kind of easy to miss. And really the insinuation throughout is that this is what they did. No, it's not. So you kind of gotta, you gotta read very thoroughly to sort of flesh that out, that this is not actually all pulled from trial records, all pulled from early modern sources. Now, the other thing that he does, it kind of is twofold here, but he presents witchcraft as being scary. So his very first exercise on just trying to get yourself noticed by the unseen world, this is, and I quote, I gotta read this here. As disturbing as it can be, you must have the bravery to bare knuckle your way through it. All right. That leads this idea that there's only a select few of you who are going to be brave enough to get through this. I find that a bit problematic. And I'll follow that one up with this idea of a select few. And the other thing, and not so much from that statement, but throughout the book, there's this idea that he presents that if you don't follow what he is suggesting to the letter of the law, to the letter of what he has written, you could lose your witching powers. So that the only way to gain witching power is through becoming witched, following this practice, working with this, being granted these powers by spirits, and then if you're not careful, you could lose those powers. So this idea that witchcraft is sort of scary, it's something that you can lose, I don't know. And then, again, with this idea that there's only a select few who are going to get through this, he says that if the exercises that he's presented don't work for you, this is right up at the beginning, you've done this first exercise to sort of gain, he has you do basically what he calls mundane scrying. You're scrying in an actual mirror, not in a scrying mirror, but in an actual, see yourself in it mirror. That if you don't get the visions that he says that you should get, that you're not one of the selected few. Sorry. You're not going to be witched. You're never going to be a witch because you didn't get the visions that he suggested, or if you don't, or maybe you do see the visions, but you get through and you make the request of the unseen powers for special, witch dreams. If you don't receive those witch dreams within the allotted period of time, sorry, he even actually goes as far as to say, if you get it, it's supposed to be a 28-day period. If you get it on day 29, you have this dream, it's not valid. Sorry, you're not one of the chosen. And to me, this is like gatekeeping behavior. This is, my way is the only way. Careful, Luna. My way is the only way. If it doesn't work for you doing it my way, then you're not deserving of being a witch. And that is just an insanely elitist attitude. I strongly disagree with that. I mean, maybe if his way doesn't work, it's just not the way you were meant to do the work. He also sort of, at least once or twice throughout the book, mentions that if you don't work with spirits in this way, you're not a real witch. Okay, I think there's lots of people who are witches who don't necessarily work with spirits and who don't work with spirits the way he exactly prescribes it. So again, some of the attitude surrounding this book is very problematic to me. But that being said, I think the work itself, the workings, the actual system that he has set out is fascinating. I think it's a really interesting way. It's unlike anything that I've really come across so far, in that it's very detailed. It's, he lays it out. Literally, these are the words you say. This is the thing that you do. This is what you should see. This is like, it's very, very laid out. I think it's a very cooperative way of working with spirits, which I love. I think a lot of the more occult side tends to get into this whole, summoning spirits and forcing them to do your will and then banishing them back to the other world, and that doesn't work. So I'm not comfortable with that. But this idea of cooperatively working with spirits, and he talks a lot about making offerings to them and how to, I think it's really interesting. So it's a complete and complex method for spirit work. So I think that if you can separate the man from the method, you'll get a lot more from this book. Because I really think there's certain parts where I kind of got a little turned off and I'm like, I don't even know if I want to read this. Like, the attitude is just a bit much. But the actual work itself, the processes and methods that he's laid out are they're fascinating. I've actually started working through them. And this is where the experiment part comes in. I'm actually going to work through his method of building creating a pact with the unseen world, creating a pact with the spirits of the unseen world. I think it's a really interesting method and I'd like to give it a try. So I guess that's where my question for you is, are you interested in actually, do you want me to do some videos on how it's going, what I'm finding, etc.? Do you want to sort of see me work through this process from the Clovenstone Workings? Or is that just not really up your alley? I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you'd like to see that experiment, because I'm definitely, I've done the first couple of exercises and it's interesting. I mean, I'm getting the results. I mean, I think he sets it up. He's like, listen, grab a mirror, set it up this way, look into it. And he says, you will see this, you will see that, then you will see this. And when you see this, say these words. And you have to do it 3 days in a row or 3 nights in a row. I did it 3 days in a row because I can't do it at night, but I did it during the day in a black room. And it was fascinating because I did actually get this jolt, this shock that he's looking for. It did actually happen for me. And, I did it and basically my candle went out, just snuffed out. And I thought, oh my God, like that's a sign if I've ever had one. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. So now I'm working through the whole part about creating the breaching talisman and actually asking the favor of witch dreams and ideally having those dreams. So if you're interested in some follow-up on, how it's going with that, let me know in the comments. I'd love to, keep you all up to date. And otherwise, yeah, have you worked with the Clovenstone Workings? Have you read the book? What did you think? I would love to know other people's opinions, because I do feel it's a little bit controversial, but again, I think the method is sound. It's the man doing the writing who's a little bit problematic. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and otherwise we'll catch you again in the next one. Mwah! Thanks so much, guys.